All right, let's go ahead and begin. So hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, maybe even good morning to some folks who might be joining us from some other part of the world. Thank you for joining us live. Today, we are going to be talking about a subject that we regularly hear from teachers who face this all the time with their students, including and especially maybe some English learners. And I'm excited today because the speakers you're going to hear from have some great insight and strategies to share about ways they use ListenWise with their students to get their English learners talking. And next, I would like to introduce our speakers of today to the group. We have an all West Hempstead Union Free School District crew today. And I'll let everyone introduce themselves. We'll start with Katie, and then we're going to go clockwise to Erin, and then Alyssa.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Katie DiGregorio. I'm the Director of E&L and Instructional Technology at the West Hempstead School District. We are located in Nassau County in Long Island, New York. I have been the administrator in the district now going on my middle of my almost 4 years. And I'm really excited to be here today with two of the fantastic ladies in the department. And I'm going to hand it over to them. So, Ms. Holtkamp.
Hi, I am Erin Holtkamp. I work at George Washington School in West Hempstead. We're a 4th through 6th grade intermediate school. I mostly teach 4th and 5th grade E&L students. I co-teach and I do standalone. And I have a wonderful partner in my friend Alyssa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Quagliata. I also teach English learners at the George Washington School along with Erin. I have mostly 6th grade students, and then I also service our students who receive special education services. And both Erin and I have started using ListenWise this school year. We explored with it last year as well. And we're very excited to share some of our experiences as well as different tools and strategies within the program that we've been using with our students this year.
We had another staff member that couldn't be here tonight, but I do want to give her a little bit of a shout out. Candace Walker is our 7th and 8th grade E&L teacher at our West Hempstead Secondary School. She's also somebody who also is really great with integrating ListenWise in her classroom. So I just wanted to make sure that she got a little shout out.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. All right. So I wanted to set the table a little bit with today's agenda, what we're going to be covering in the webinar. First, we're going to do a brief introduction to ListenWise. Some of you might be people who've used ListenWise for a long time. Maybe this is your first year, or maybe you've never used ListenWise before, and it would be good to give you a little bit of an idea of what our platform offers and how you could use this with your English learners of all kinds. And then, of course, we're going to explore how educators and administration from West Hempstead implement ListenWise in their classroom. And we're going to hear more in depth about that a little bit later from the individual teacher perspectives. But first, in the spirit of getting people talking, it feels like we should have an icebreaker to kick things off. And I have an important question, which is, does pineapple belong on pizza? And I would like you to answer yes or no in the chat. Oh, people already jumped in. Lots of opinions. Please take a moment and type your answer in the chat if you're joining us live, or if you're catching the replay, please feel free to comment should you feel so moved. So while we wait for the results to come in, I will share with you the reason why I chose this question. I like someone wrote occasionally. I think that that's a really middle of the road answer, and I appreciate that.
I would love to know why.
Like that, it's honest.
Yeah.
Well, so why did I choose this? Well, pizza, everybody has an opinion, and I'm willing to bet that pretty much every kid in your classroom has strong opinions about pizza, whether it's a recommendation of a place in their city or their town or their neighborhood, where is the best pizza, what's their favorite pizza topping, or what does or does not belong on pizza. That is a great conversation starter right there. But I also like pizza because pizza toppings choices are regional, they're national, they're cultural, and of course they're personal. So there's lots of different ways that we decide what goes on a pizza, and from our experience. And pretty much everybody you meet, no matter where they come from, is probably going to have an opinion some way or another on that. And impassioned opinions make great stories. So if you look above, you'll see that we have an image from one of our weird news stories called Detroit Wins Best Pizza City in the United States. And our weird news stories, if you're not familiar with them, they're all about 30 seconds or shorter in length. So super short, really great to use with all kinds of students, but especially our English learners. And we often hear that our weird news provides a really great conversation point from teachers who want to generate incredible conversations in their classroom. I also, just as I was doing some research for this, I found this cute map. It's a little bit hard to see on here, but it's a map of pizza topping preferences across the United States. I thought this could also be a good entry point for a class discussion, possibly. If you look on there, identify your state. What is your state's alleged favorite pizza topping? And then do you agree or disagree? And there's some good sentence stems to come from that. Now that we're all hungry, I'm going to go to talking a little bit about ListenWise. So if you're not familiar with ListenWise, we are a ed tech platform where we use curated podcasts and video lessons for grades 2 through 12. Our lessons go across all different kinds of subject matter. That's ELD, ELA, social studies, STEM, and current events. And our lessons are easy to differentiate and scaffold to meet student needs, be it for English learners, learning differences, or different grade levels. And what are our learning goals? So over here we have a list. It's not entirely exhaustive, but this is sort of the big ticket items. What do we want to do with ListenWise? We want to teach content and language together. When we started the company, it was really focused on listening, but we're really talking about how all of the literacy skills work together. Listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Those all go together. They're all part of the literacy puzzle, and they all are skills that need to be built and exercised. We work with vocabulary and academic language. We have curriculum aligned content to help build background knowledge, especially our English learners really need that. And as an added bonus, we also have a lot of content that focuses on SEL skills, which is something that across the board, we know that a lot of teachers want to implement in their classroom. And of course, critical thinking skills too. If you've never explored our ELD lesson library, I just wanted to give you a little screenshot here as a taste of kind of how it's laid out and what sorts of lessons we have available. We have lots of our ELD lessons here. We have things that are about sort of family history and culture, like picking watercress, which is all about family childhood recipes and food choices. Differences at the table is also about food. There's a definite theme happening tonight on this webinar with food, but we cover a lot of science subjects, which we've heard from teachers that for ELD students is something that they're really looking for. So lots of different content that you can use with your students. And as of this past, this back to school, we've now doubled the amount of ELD lessons we have. We just started our ELD lesson library a little bit less than a year ago, so we've now doubled it. So we are constantly adding to this library, putting new things in there all the time. So if you haven't checked it out, you'll definitely want to do that soon. And then here is a preview of some things we've recently added to make it even more powerful for teachers and make things easy to find. We edited our drop-down menus to make them easier to search for exactly the right lesson for your students. We also added in our ELP levels. So you can search by ELP level to make sure that the lesson that you find is exactly at the right ELP level for your students. And here's a couple of previews of what you can find in our platform. We have these vocabulary flashcards. So this is a great way to preview the vocabulary that your students are going to be seeing during the lesson. And I want to also point out that they include cognates. So if you have Spanish language speakers, they can look at these and you can automatically see the cognates. You don't have to do any extra legwork identifying those. We've taken care of it for you. Our multimodal lessons, all of our ELD lessons come with at least one video, sometimes even up to 3 videos that you can use to build that background knowledge before you share it with the podcast with your students. Sometimes we have multiple videos and you'll find that they're all at slightly different levels. So you might have one that's maybe better for much younger students, and then you'll have them all the way up to something that's a little bit more advanced. So you can pick which one really applies for your student population. And our podcast transcripts and supports that are built in. This is a really popular thing that we have called our text help toolbar. And we have it built into ListenWise so that when you're reading through the podcast transcript, not only can you slow down the audio, Your students can also read along with the transcript, and it kind of operates like a karaoke song, so that it sort of the letters get colored in as you follow along. But also you're able to take our text help toolbar and highlight either words, sentences, or complete paragraphs and translate it into over now 15 different languages. So you can just highlight that, translate it, and then some of the languages will also play the audio for them, so they don't just see it written out, they can actually hear the pronunciation as well in whatever language they're choosing. So that's a new thing that we now have over 15 languages. All right, so now that you have a little bit more information about ListenWise, I'm going to turn things over to our fabulous speakers, and I'm going to let Dr. Katie get started. And if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your journey to ListenWise adoption for your district and your student population, and anything else you'd like to share with us today.
So about a year and a half ago, I was scrolling through social media, and I was really looking for a tool that could help our English language learners develop that listening component, right? So it's a really major part of their language acquisition process, is to be able to retain and get information in the auditory way. So I just happened to be on social media, and I was like, ooh, this looks really great. And all of a sudden it took me down a rabbit hole, right? So I investigated it. I piloted it with my 7th and 8th grade ENL teacher, and she just fell in love with it because it really has so many stories and ideas that tie into a lot of the work that we're doing in our district, particularly in our 7th and 8th grade ELA curriculum. So at the West Hempstead School District, we really subscribe to this idea of designing learning. And that's really what we're trying to do to support our learners, is to design opportunities for them to feel successful and gain mastery of their content, right? So we refer a lot of the times to this puzzle piece, our designing learning puzzle piece, and it really, ListenWise does align nicely with those things that we're trying to do for students, right? We were talking before about the weird news, right? Those are things that some of our students particularly may have no past knowledge about, right? So those are things that we can bring into the classroom. And we've also paired it with different instructional strategies to really drive home that idea of oral, listening, reading, and writing. So it's really a multi-pronged approach to developing our learners. We've seen a lot of success, especially when we're getting students talking. And we find that our state assessment, the listening component is always the part that our students really need help with, more from the perspective of it's just not a skill that we hone in all the time. So ListenWise was a way for us to kind of get into that and have them vitally connected to those stories. That's kind of where it started and how it kind of snowballed. And then I shared it with the ladies over at GW, and they kind of took it off there. I remember I worked in a lesson with our 7th and 8th grade teacher about getting them talking. And we did the story about the green dog, which we'll see later. But bringing that together through the lens of reading and writing and processing it and at a level that they can intake was a fantastic experience, because many of us who are ENL teachers, we have varied levels in our classrooms, right? We have students who have very little English to those who are almost tested out, right? So what ListenWise does is it almost levels the playing field for us. So that's kind of how it came to be. And we really believe in this idea of designing learning for students, because that's how you're going to get the best out of our students.
Fantastic. And would you be able to tell me a little bit about your English learner population? And I notice also you call them ENL. We
Yeah,
acronyms all over the United States.
It's always
so
changing.
clarify.
It's always changing. Well, we use the term ENL in New York State, but it's changed so many times. We multilingual learners. I think about 40% of our population is Hispanic. Or Spanish speaking. We have seen in the last about a year, we've seen a lot of students come from China, Dominican Republic. We have a student from Russia and Uzbekistan. So our population is growing and is becoming more diverse, which is great, because now that with ListenWise, you have other languages, right? So students are able to get that input in a way that they may have not gotten before. So we are growing. We have about 150 Ls district-wide. We are a very small school, but we always like to say we're small but mighty.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Okay, well, let's keep it going.
And then these are just some examples of some of our students that we have. We also try to get students to talk and embrace their multilingualism. And that's one of the things we do with our Seal of Biliteracy here in New York State. We try to celebrate the students who are multilingual. Again, going back to this idea of reading and writing and being critical thinkers. The bottom left picture is a class that we have this year, and they're talking, and we have Spanish speakers and kids who speak Chinese in the same class and engaging in conversation, right? So these are just some examples of how listening really does translate into other areas. And it's really kind of something that just to see where these kids are, the high school kids, were some of those kids that were in that middle picture who came from our primary center. So it's been a really great journey the last couple of years. And I'm looking forward to seeing how these students really, truly progress.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your students. And who do we have next to speak?
This is me. Hi. So I'm going to share some different ideas for how to get our kids talking. And so I've been definitely using ListenWise the past few weeks and as we've started school. And, as I had shared with you when we were getting ready for this presentation, the exploratory phase as you're getting used to using ListenWise and kind of onboarding students is just as important as, when you're used to it and you're, kind of fluent with the tool. So I am going to share some of those experiences with all of you because it's really important to pay attention to what your students are noticing on ListenWise as well as yourself. First of all, it's really important to make sure that you connect ListenWise to real life. So as I got the students ready for ListenWise this year, I explained to them what a podcast is because they've probably heard something around them now that they're all on their phones. I mean, we do have intermediate level students. And I explained that they're going to be getting real information. It might be funny information, it might be serious information, but it does connect to real life. And so the first few times that we went back to it, I made sure that I, wrote down the definition, we kind of pulled it apart. And these were students in New York, we would say they're transitioning level students, maybe a level 3 out of 5 or so. And we talked about that importance. I made sure to make it fun. So I asked my students what they were curious about. What is something that they really wanted to learn about? I noticed that one of my students, when I went to go pick him up, I was getting him out of his science class. And a student that I had no idea was excited about science, I noticed that about him. So one of the first things that I assigned to him was about how snow is made, because I know that he needs to focus on some of the thematic areas. And whereas I would have started with something about maybe fall and pumpkins, I decided to do snow because I know that, I know that we've talked about snow and that's not something that he's so used to. So I decided to do snow first. Listen to a funny podcast with your students. That's another really good strategy. I'm going to go back to what Dr. DiGregorio was saying about the weird news. And we were talking earlier about, did you mention the green dog earlier? Or did we talk about that privately? I think you mentioned it earlier, right?
I did mention it because it's
You
the
did
one that
mention
sticks
it.
out the
I don't want to
most.
I don't want to give away what you were going to share about that story, but there is something that pops up about a green dog on ListenWise. And I know there's other weird news, but the green dog pops up often. I feel like my students always see it. Then there's something about a green dog that will make them, kind of go, they just go back in their seats like this. So take time to listen to a podcast together. That will definitely get your students talking, if not the words, definitely the images that they show. And also, like I said earlier, let your students explore their own learning. There are so many tools that they can play around with. And, definitely be mindful of students who are not as fluent with technology, but for those students that are, they will figure out how to get the text to read to them or how to translate words. So that goes into my next point of the text help toolbar. The students that I've been working with, some of them do benefit from having the text read aloud to them. So showing them how to use those tools is really important. And it'll help them track the text. And some students need that for different reasons. I also had a student who you can choose whether you assign the transcript or not. And I had one student who was able to fill in the answers because he was going back and following the transcript. Whereas another student may think that that transcript is too much. It might be better to just listen auditorily. You can also customize the settings. So here I wrote on the slide quizzes. You can modify questions for students. You can, so right away in my mind, I'm thinking I might simplify language for a student at one level versus another level. You can also customize what pops up on a student's screen. So you may want a student to listen to the content and language objectives, whereas I have some students where I don't want that much on their screen. So the past couple of weeks, I've really been exploring how you can use the tool. And just like we always do as teachers of English learners, you really have to get to know the individual student and decide what's going to be best for them.
Wonderful. Yeah, as you were talking, I thought of a few things. One is just to mention that we hear that sort of customizable, the customizability that you mentioned using for certain students based on their needs is, of course, a primary use of that. But also we do hear from teachers that depending on what your state testing is for your ELs, you might find that to help make ListenWise more of a test prep resource, which is not the primary intent, but it can be useful like that. There are ways to customize it when you get to that time of year so that you can start removing things that they would not be able to use in the test to help make sure that they feel more comfortable so they know what kind of format they're getting into. And yes, I was thinking about the green dog. We were talking about the green dog. I used it recently in a social post that we made. And I think some of our weird news stories are, I think to a native English speaker, they're automatically funny and you get sort of the joke right away. But the green dog is such a great story because it's just automatically a visual. The picture, once you see it, if you're done with the webinar and you go to see the green dog picture, is literally sort of like a white, like fluffy little dog, but it's like lime green. It's just an obvious sort of visual clue to students that they're in on the joke right away. It doesn't require a lot of language to get it, and then you're able to decode it afterwards. I think it's a really nice part of that story. We have some stories that are like that, and then also some that are a little bit more, maybe more of a head scratcher. You have to spend a little bit more time decoding, but we have so many weird news stories that are super fun to share with students and something for everybody. And here he is. This is the green dog we've all
Here
been
he
hearing
is.
about.
Green dog.
Everybody's
Did
going to
you
go
have
read about it now.
Yes.
Did you have anything you wanted to share about that, Dr. DiGregorio?
It was one of those things where, again, it was such a out of their topic that I kind of, when I had done this with the 7th and 8th graders, we had actually done it with another instructional strategy for this. It's called a cyber sandwich. So we had kind of done that where they kind of wrote, I leveled it, they listened to it. Then they talked about it, and then they kind of crowdsourced their notes and did a writing, but it was just one of those ones that they're like, what? But again, things like this piques their interest, right? So that was my biggest takeaway from that.
Perfect. And this other thing the screenshot shows you is, as I mentioned, maybe if you're a longtime ListenWise user, you'll notice that we made some changes to our drop-down menu. So now you can just automatically click current events. We noticed that a lot of people, we're always trying to make the product better. And we noticed that a lot of people were just typing in weird news all the time in the search bar. And we thought we could make this easier for everybody and just make it a drop-down and you could pick out exactly what you want. And some of our heavy hitters were things like weird news. Debate is a huge one that we hear about, especially around the idea of getting students talking. And of course, kid news and features, and then the lessons are breaking it down by subject matter and age and things like that. All right. some more ideas.
Okay, so I also like to use ListenWise for teaching thematic lessons. So within my standalone, Erin and I both like to, create thematic lessons. And I would say Erin more so. So anything in our room that is, showing fall right now or anything like that is coming from her. So I cannot take credit for that. But so with that same group of students that I was talking about science with, I also wanted to teach some science and fun fall things with pumpkins. So when I was assigning lessons, I found something called the rotting pumpkin mystery. And so that was another lesson that I had assigned. And just quickly before I go into that, on the bottom, I put a screenshot. I eliminated the names, but you can see that I had assigned a lesson. And for anyone who is like brand new to ListenWise, you can see on the left, it would say the student's name, and then it can show the status of the student in regards to the assignment. So 2 students had not started yet when I took the screenshot, and the other student had started. It says the name, shows you the time spent on the assignment, and then the language that they are using. So if a student had decided to use Spanish or another language, in this case, it would have been Spanish because that is the only other language in that class. It would show me there, but all 3 of the students were using English. And then when you are done looking at an assignment, you can leave feedback, and that is where it would pop up. So a student on their end would be able to see if they received feedback. And for this specific lesson, right away, the students were very excited. They started talking about pumpkins, and they were talking about that led to talking about Halloween and talking about what costumes they were going to wear. And they were talking about the pumpkin decoration contest that's coming up. So just as we were saying with the green dog, just seeing some of the visuals gets the kids excited and talking, and that is our goal, to get the kids talking. So because I know Erin and I reflect on this a lot, that of course we want the kids talking about what's going on in the classrooms, but for some students, just having those small conversations where they're smiling and laughing, we know how important those are as well. So I think it's really nice to see just the excitement around what they're going to listen to and hearing them giggle at some of those things. So that was just a point that I wanted to make as well. But so you see that they're excited. You break apart some of the words in the title, and then they're ready to start working. So I do really like seeing how excited they are about the topics. And yeah, so I can't wait to see their responses. They are still working. I find that if I get my kids working and they have about 15 to 20 minutes of independent time, it does take them some time, kids at this level, because it does ask them to listen more than one time. I think you can adjust that. But for a student around like a transitioning level, I like having them listen 2 to 3 times, just to give a point of reference. And those are the students I've been using it with right now. So
Wonderful. And you were talking about themes and how you love a theme. Well, we love a theme as well, and we're heading into the holiday season. And we have a blog post, actually, if people want to go look for that later. Maybe I'll include it if I can remember in the follow-up email that goes out with the webinar recording, of all of our different holiday themed or sort of like seasonal themed lessons all gathered together. And of course, the Rotting Pumpkin Mystery is a popular choice for that one. We also have one about bats that came up recently on a webinar that someone was really into our bat stories. So a little bit of everything. And yes, I can totally relate to the idea of just getting them engaged in some way, smiling, having fun with it. That's a huge part of the learning experience as well. Okay, and now we have Erin.
All right. Hi. So I have some ideas for how to get some of my students talking. I have been using this a little bit in my standalone. And in my standalone, I have two entering and one emerging. One speaks Russian, two speaks Spanish. So I use it a little differently because one is capable of reading in their, actually two are capable of reading in their first language, and the other is not so much. So a lot of use of the visuals is very, very helpful. And I will add to those visuals and verbal translations when I need to kind of do a little background knowledge with all of them before I can send them off. So building that background knowledge is really important and depends on the group that you have. I happen to have beginners mostly in this group, so I need to heavily scaffold for them that background knowledge. We will be doing research this year, and they have to pick something that they want to research. And stopping plastic pollution is one of them. So there's so many great stories and ideas that will help them do the research. Some may even be funny, but they can include that in their writing. And, that will be great for other students to see, wow, where did you get that? Where did you see that information? So that really is wonderful for our students because it just builds their confidence tremendously. So I've really enjoyed seeing the different topics that are available really for our students and how I can tweak it, I can scaffold it, I can use different parts of it. Like Alyssa said, I don't need them to see the objectives. I don't need them to see the extra things that are going to confuse them, but letting them listen to it and see the visuals and then work together as a group maybe after or before has really helped my small group.
Wonderful. And we have here about SEL, which we sort of mentioned at the beginning.
This is Ms. Holtcamp's jam. This is her jam.
All right.
This is her jam.
SEL is my jam. I am a mom of two, so I think that's automatic SEL. It's built in, two girls. So you don't have much choice with girls. And I have found over the past few years that our students really truly come to us as kind of backup parents in a way. And they open up to us so much. So when we are able to find tools that in turn help them open up and we get to know them in ways we may not have known them because we may not have had those tools, it just opens up their whole world and our relationships with them. So you can find things on diversity, bullying, family life, some really important things. I did one today that was about coming to the US and the first time in school and how they felt. And it was really about how another student felt, but the connection was automatically made. All three of them had a first experience in the United States, in our school, how it felt, how they are currently feeling. One has only been there 2.5 months, my Russian student. And it's funny, she works closely with a student who has been here about a little over a year. They sit next to each other and they go from English to Spanish to Russian to English to Spanish, and they communicate all day long. So even though the current event may be in English, because I like them to listen to what they can in English because they're able to understand quite a bit, they will then use their computer or other devices to communicate how they feel about what they've learned or what we are learning. So those connections are not only with me, but with each other. And to see them smile at each other. And something Miss Quagliata and I do is we have this special chair that my daughter, didn't want anymore as usual because she's 13, and it's a big purple chair, and we call it the VIP chair. And it's, the way they earn getting into the VIP chair is just working hard and being kind, helping others, just in the 40 minutes that we have them. And it's amazing to watch at the end how they give a sticker to someone else every single time. It's really a beautiful thing. So it just these current events and these silly stories and these real life stories and things about diversity and family life and maybe even things that they've actually been through that I never would have known about can come out in stories from ListenWise. And, that's a gift for me because then I'm able to reach out to the families, to the students, whatever makes them comfortable. And they'll let me know. They open up very quickly to all of us, especially Ms. Quagliata and I, because we have a very nice classroom, very loving. We also have a little bit of candy, so that helps. But they really are amazing with it. So the Listen Why stories will help just continue to create that safe environment for them where they can always come. And believe me, they always come.
I love that. What a gift. And I
Yes.
like that you mentioned, that when we talk about getting students to talk, we're not just talking about getting them to speak the target language, we're getting them to speak their native language and getting them to hear and be in communication with people who are speaking a native language they're not familiar with, and how that's all welcomed and valued and part of the learning process.
It was really mind blowing. Ms. Quagliata and I watched it firsthand. They were so excited and they were like, you speak Russian? Can you say something? And when she said something, oh, it's beautiful. You're beautiful. Just, I mean, so positive. So that's been really beautiful for us to watch. And she is so bright and wants to contribute to everything that we possibly can. So, excuse me while my mom calls. So that's been really like a gift for all of us. And then to see them on their own communicating multilingually, and then teach us, I'm trying to learn Russian and I'm not very good at it. And she laughs at me, which just, makes it all very fun. It's really great. So, sorry, I don't know.
No, it's okay. Yeah, the idea of, I hear that from teachers too, this idea of getting your students to teach you as well, and having fun with the idea of you're showing some vulnerability and that you are
Yes.
still a lifelong learner, that it's okay that you're going to mess up. They're going to try to teach you. Maybe your accent isn't great, or you forgot that word that we taught you, last week or whatever, but being able to be co-learners with them is
Yes.
just a real,
Wonderful.
really special thing. Okay, look at those learners.
So there's some of my students getting ready to get set for ListenWise. And we did it step by step together to create our first class. I co-teach with 5 teachers. And my plan is to implement this into the other classrooms. And I'm going to start with my students. I'd like to get it used in like the expanding students and really use it for whatever thing we might be doing in reading and writing in those classes. So I started with something I can control a little more, which would be my standalone. So this is my standalone, getting ready to set up. And it really was very easy. They followed directions and within minutes, we had our class set up. I showed them where their names were and they were really excited. And they saw that, it said standalone, had their names. And then my other classes were listed with no students because I haven't set them up yet. So it really went very quickly. And again, I have students who don't speak English sitting there, able to follow my directions and, my ability as an E&L teacher to dance around and, have fun and use my body and make sure they understand. They got it.
Fantastic. Wonderful. And just to mention also, something that we have started piloting recently is, and I sent it to you all as well, but this is new. We haven't shown it to everybody yet, but if you're interested, please email us and we will send you a link to it. But some student onboarding videos that you can then play for your students. We have one in English and we have one in Spanish. It will walk them through how they would go about using their first lesson or encountering their first lesson. They're very short, and the idea is that you can just press play, hit pause when it tells you to hit pause, and then it explains the whole thing and walks them through the different stages to make that onboarding process really as easy as possible, take some of the weight off of you all.
Great.
So Erin and I had used those videos and they were very
Oh,
helpful.
great.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Great.
So
All right.
just so for everyone that's watching, those videos are extremely helpful. Those were the YouTube videos, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it shows from a student view exactly what they're going to see. And once you decide if you're going to be using, Google Classroom, or if you're going to give them a class code or whatever, it really does show them exactly what they're going to see. It's a great video.
Great. Glad to hear it. Okay.
So this is some of the information I had collected from our grade 7 and 8 teacher. And one of the ways that when she first started doing it, and her and I had spoke about it, she actually uses ListenWise after the fact. So she actually does a way to get the students talking first. And she actually started to implement what we call a mayo mustard ketchup board. Kind of play on words, for the students to kind of give them a little bit of choice on what they're working on. But she uses this idea of the this or that or would you rather in order to garner the conversations. And then usually that's what translates into what the students are going to be using the tool for, right? So that's kind of too how the weird news thing came up with her and I. And then I think the other one we had done was where I think it's the bugs where they change, like, do they have a superpower? I think that was one of the ones that we had done. So really, there's so many different ways that you can get students to talk. It could either, with the product, with ListenWise, it could be something that they listen to and then talk about, or also to get the interest first and then kind of give them ownership of where they want to go and how they want to do it, right? It's really also important too to think about the level and the age appropriateness of your learners. This wouldn't be something I would go off and learn, with a third grader maybe, but a high school kid in 2nd and 7th and 8th grade. And I do know that our high school teacher uses it, who is our 9 to 12 E&L teacher who teaches our science classes. She also started to use this too, just again to build that background knowledge that Erin and Alyssa were both speaking about. Because again, this is sometimes students don't have background knowledge. We just take for granted that they know about photosynthesis, but maybe they don't, right? So this is a nice way for you to also have a conversation and then drive the instruction based on that conversation with them. And again, this mayo mustard ketchup board, it's such a funny thing to think about, but it really does help structure what students are doing and how they're thinking. And it's something that anytime I've walked in there, she's always using that model. And the this or that could be anything that you're really talking about. So it's just an interesting way to approach it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be talking after the listening. It could be something that you do beforehand.
Love that. Yeah, you can use ListenWise in any part of the process, whether it's a multi-day lesson that you're doing and it's just one element of those things, or as you mentioned, something to build background knowledge before you go into a topic, to sort of get in there, dip a toe in, or to help explain something after the fact. There's lots of different ways to use it. I love
It was so funny. After we spoke the other day, I had seen one on a long walk to water, and I opened up my door and I was like, make sure you check out the one on a long walk to water, right? Because again, what's also great for us in administration when I'm talking about it with teachers is it's constantly changing and being constantly updated. So one day there may be something and then the next day there won't be, or it could be something totally different, right? So that's really been nice, is ever since we started using this about a year ago, the collections have just kind of evolved to reflect different, like you said, different news or current events or the debate. It's really kind of evolved into something that is really comprehensive.
Fabulous. That's a great segue into this thing I was going to leave everybody with, which is we've improved our collections. And this is a great way to have your students practice some student choice as well, and get a sense for what would work for your ELP levels and the subject and the grades. So now you can find our collections. Just head over to our toolbar, click on collections, and then you can filter to find exactly what you want. It's not overwhelming, so you can just go over to the little caret, the little orange caret on the right, click down, and then you'll see all of the lessons that fall under that that collection. So we have over 90 lesson or collections now, and you can look for things on was looking this up recently. What were some of the things? Are animal adaptations, there's ancient civilizations, America's Many Voices, things about the founding of the United States, lots of different, kind of everything across the board. So definitely play around, enjoy the collections, and they are also always growing. So definitely keep those in mind when you're trying to think of something that's going to connect to anything that you're teaching in class. And then now, would like to, of course, thank our speakers for joining us today and sharing their great stories about how they use Listen Wise in their classroom, about their learners and how they get students talking. And before we sign off, wanted to let people have an opportunity to ask any kinds of questions. So if you're here live with us, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we'll kind of hang out a little bit to hear if we get any questions.